For the other problem, our DirectTV, well, I could find my practical domain and practical range by, again, looking at the problem itself and seeing what it tells me about my input. So remember, the practical domain refers to the interval or the set of all possible values of the input, typically stated as minimum to maximum. That way, you're saying, well, here's the least, here's the most, and oftentimes things in between will work. Okay, so let's look at the last sentence here. You usually do not view more than 4 on-demand movies each month. So that will tell us that the number of movies, M, is going to be less than or equal to 4. Well, why is it less than? Because it says you usually do not view more than 4 on-demand movies. Well, if you don't view more than 4, then that means you don't necessarily view exactly 4. That means that it's at most 4. So it's 4 or less. Okay, so in that case, my practical domain would be 0 movies to 4 movies. And we know that as you watch more movies, the price goes up. So what would my corresponding range be? Well, in this case, that's the size of the bill. So if I only view 0 movies, what's my bill? $59.95. I'm paying my regular DirectTV bill for that month. Now, if I watch 4 movies, that's going to be my base, $59.95, plus 4 fees of $4.95, because that's what I pay. And that comes out to $79.75. So that means my bill will range somewhere in between here. Alright, well that's good and dandy, but could we be any more specific in this problem? In the hourly wage problem, we can probably agree that you can work fractional or decimal hours. So you punch in and punch out, and maybe you actually work 23.6 hours. But in this context, is it possible to only watch half of a movie? Well, yes, it is possible to view half of a movie, but you're still going to pay for the movie. So we either watch 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 movies. And typically, when the values of the variable are what we call discrete, we oftentimes will write them in these curly braces, and we'll typically write the possible domain values in there. So this is what we call discrete. I'll write that word. This is a discrete variable because it can only take on, it's not that you have to be quiet about it, you can talk about it, not that kind of discrete, but it can only take on what we call integer or whole number values between 0 and 4. Well, that also changes our range, right? Because that doesn't mean you can pay anywhere in between $59.95 and $79.75. That means, well, if you work 0 hours, you would pay $59.95. If you work, sorry, not worked, but if you watched 1 movie, you would pay $64.90. If you watched 2 on-demand movies, you'd be at, let's see, that would be 68, 69, 80, and so on and so forth. And so we would do that for 3 movies and 4 movies as well. Now it's not, you know, in a lot of contexts people are very precise and want to write it this way, but you and I probably know that we can't watch fractional movies, so really we can probably look at this and say, well, obviously the number of movies that I watch is going to be from somewhere between 0 and 4, but it can't be a fraction of a movie because I know I still have to pay for it if I order it. So just keep in mind that sometimes we write domain and range a little bit differently depending on whether the variable is continuous, like the number of hours that you work, because it can be anything between 0 and 30, but the number of movies that you watch is discrete because it can only be an integer value.